Billionaire kids humiliated a poor street girl and asked her to cook. The outcome shocked them. If you're just tuning into this channel, please subscribe, give this video a thumbs up, and don't forget to share with your friends and family and tell us where you are watching from. It was a scorching Tuesday afternoon, and the Ojo mansion's kitchen looked like a tornado had thrown a tantrum. Gabriel Ojo, CEO of Ojo Construction Empire, stood in the middle of the disaster with his sleeves rolled up and desperation written all over his face. 3 pots were boiling over on the stove, bubbling like angry volcanoes. Rice was stuck to the ceiling, yes, the ceiling, and somehow, an entire carton of eggs had ended up smashed on the marble floor. The smoke alarm was wailing like it was announcing the end of the world. Gabriel's designer suit jacket hung on a chair, stained with tomato sauce and what looked like palm oil. This wasn't a kitchen. It was a war zone. And Gabriel, the man who commanded boardrooms and closed million-dollar deals without breaking a sweat, was clearly waving the white flag of surrender. "Boys, lunch is almost ready," he called out, his voice cracking with exhaustion, looking like he'd aged 10 years in one morning. Then came the sound. 3 pairs of feet stampeding down the grand staircase like a herd of elephants. "I'm not eating anything Daddy touches," announced John, the eldest triplet by 3 minutes, adjusting his designer sunglasses even though they were indoors. "Last time he cooked, I thought I was going to die," Peter added, dramatically clutching his stomach like he'd been poisoned. Auntie Joy never burned the rice. Auntie Joy knew how to cook. "Why did you send her away?" Paul chimed in, crossing his arms with the confidence of a tiny judge passing sentence. "You boys sent her away." Gabriel snapped, running his hand through his disheveled hair. "You put hot pepper in her water bottle, remember?" "That was just a joke," John shrugged, grinning wickedly. "She cried for 20 minutes, Gabriel reminded them. "She was weak." "We need someone strong," Peter declared, as if he were recruiting soldiers for battle. Gabriel looked at his 3 7-year-old sons, identical faces, identical mischief, identical ability to drive every nanny, cook, and housekeeper out of his mansion within weeks. 15 staff members in 2 years. 15. His late wife would have handled them with one look. But she was gone, and he was drowning. "Lucy," he shouted toward the living room, where his secretary was reviewing documents. "Call the agency again. We need someone. Anyone." Lucy appeared in the kitchen doorway, took one look at the disaster, and shook her head. "Sir, the agencies have blacklisted us. Nobody wants to work here anymore. Your sons have a reputation." "We're not that bad," the triplet said in perfect unison, their innocent faces fooling absolutely no one. Gabriel leaned against the counter, defeated. "Then what do I do? I can't keep cooking. I'm running a company, not a restaurant. And clearly," he gestured at the ceiling rice, "I'm not qualified for this." Lucy bit her lip, thinking. "Sir, maybe we need someone who isn't from an agency. Someone who won't scare easily. Someone who's lived real life." "Who?" Lucy pulled out her phone. "Let me make a call. I might know someone." Meanwhile, across the town, there was Rosemary. She stood on the dusty roadside under the merciless afternoon sun, a large metal bowl of fried plantains balanced perfectly on her head. Her faded wrapper clung to her waist. Her blouse had been washed so many times the color had surrendered, and her feet, bare except for worn rubber slippers, were dusty from the unpaved street. But her posture was straight. Her eyes were clear. And when she called out to potential customers, her voice carried strength despite everything. "Fresh plantain. Sweet plantain. Come and buy." A few people stopped. A Okada rider bought 2 pieces. A woman with a baby bought 5. It wasn't much, but every sale was a small victory in her daily battle to survive. Then she heard it. The roar of an engine. The kind that announced money before you even saw the vehicle. A gleaming white SUV pulled up beside her, so clean it looked like it had been polished that morning. The windows were tinted, but they rolled down slowly, dramatically, like a curtain rising on a stage. 3 identical boys leaned out, wearing matching designer shirts in different colors and sunglasses that probably cost more than everything Rosemary owned combined. They looked at her the way lions look at something beneath their notice. "Look," A street rat. Peter pointed at her, laughing loud enough for the entire street to hear. Does she even know what a real kitchen looks like? John added, smirking. Paul, the quietest but somehow the cruelest, tilted his head and asked in a voice dripping with mockery, "Hey you, can you even cook, or do you just burn things on the roadside?" The street went quiet. Other vendors stopped moving. Customers paused. Everyone waited to see what would happen. Rosemary slowly, carefully, lowered the bowl from her head. She set it down on her small wooden stand. Then she looked directly at the three boys with a calm that surprised even herself. "Young sirs," she said, her voice steady and clear, "I have been cooking on this street for 7 years. My plantain never burns. My customers come back every single day. And I can tell from looking at you that you've never tasted food made with struggle, sweat, and love. That's why you don't know what real cooking is." The boys' mouths fell open. From inside the SUV, a deep voice said, "That's enough." The driver's door opened, and out stepped Gabriel Ojo, tall, imposing, wearing a suit that cost more than 6 months of Rosemary's earnings. But his face was flushed with embarrassment. "I am so sorry," he said, walking toward Rosemary. "My sons, they don't have manners. Please forgive them." "It's not your fault, sir," Rosemary said quietly, picking up her bowl again. "They're just children." Gabriel studied her, really looked at her. Her dignity, her composure, the way she'd stood her ground without raising her voice or breaking down. Then he looked back at his 3 spoiled sons, who were still stunned into silence. An idea struck him. A crazy, impulsive, possibly brilliant idea. "What's your name?" he asked. "Rosemary, sir." "Rosemary, do you need a job?" She blinked. "Sir, I need someone to cook and help manage my household. Someone who won't run away when things get difficult. Someone with backbone." He glanced pointedly at his sons. "These 3 have chased away 15 people. But you just stood up to them without fear. I think you might be exactly what we need." Rosemary's heart began to pound. A job? A real job? In a mansion? With a steady salary? The kind of money that could change everything? I don't have certificates, sir. I only finished secondary school. I just cook on the street." "Can you cook?" "Yes, sir. Anything. Everything." "Then you're overqualified compared to the last 5 people I hired." Gabriel pulled out a business card and a pen, scribbling something on the back. "This is my address. Come tomorrow morning at 8. We'll talk details." From inside the SUV, John's voice rang out, loud and challenging, "Wait. If she's so great, let her prove it first." Gabriel sighed. "John." "No, Daddy. You always hire people and they can't cook. Let her cook for us first." Peter jumped in. "Yes. Let her make lunch tomorrow. If it's good, she can stay. If it's terrible like everyone else, she leaves." Paul added. The 3 boys looked at each other and nodded, their momentary shock replaced by their usual arrogance. They'd made this challenge before to other candidates. Every single one had failed. Some served bland food. Some served burned food. One woman had actually served them instant noodles and called it gourmet. This street woman? She wouldn't last 5 minutes in their kitchen. Gabriel looked apologetic. "You don't have to accept their challenge. I'm hiring you regardless." "I accept," Rosemary said firmly. Everyone froze. "I accept your challenge," she repeated, looking directly at the 3 boys. "Tomorrow, I will cook for you. And you will eat every single bite." The triplets glanced at each other, suddenly less certain. Gabriel smiled for the first time that day. "Then we have an agreement. Tomorrow at 8. Don't be late." As the SUV drove away, Rosemary stood on the roadside, Gabriel's card clutched in her hand, her heart racing between hope and terror. She had no idea that tomorrow would change everything. And neither did 3 spoiled little boys who were about to learn that real cooking, and real strength, doesn't come from a mansion. It comes from the street. The night before the street encounter, Rosemary had sat on the edge of her bed in the tiny room she shared with Christopher, counting the day's earnings. 43 coins. Barely enough for transportation and ingredients for tomorrow. She tucked the money into a tin hidden under the mattress, her movements quiet and practiced. Is that all? Christopher's voice cut through the darkness. He lay on his side, back turned to her, but she could hear the disgust in his tone. It was a slow day, Rosemary said softly. Tomorrow will be better. Tomorrow will be the same. Just like you. Always the same. Always useless. Rosemary's hands stilled. She wanted to say that she worked 14 hours a day, that her feet ached and her back screamed, that she was doing everything she could. But she'd learned that words only made things worse. Come and eat, Christopher. I made your favorite soup. I'm not hungry. He turned to face her, and even in the dim light, she could see the bitterness carved into his features. Do you know what my co-workers asked me today? They asked me when we're having a child. 5 years, Rosemary. 5 years of marriage and nothing. Nothing to show for it. The doctor said we should keep trying. The doctor said you're the problem. Christopher sat up, his voice rising. Your womb is the problem. My mother was right. I married a woman who can't even do the one thing women are supposed to do. Rosemary felt the familiar sting of tears but refused to let them fall. Not in front of him. Not anymore. The door creaked open and Mama Christopher swept in without knocking, as she always did. The woman's presence filled the small room like smoke, suffocating everything. I heard shouting, Mama Christopher said, though her satisfied expression suggested she'd been listening at the door. She looked at Rosemary with the same expression she'd give a rotting fruit. What has this empty vessel done now? Mama, please, Rosemary whispered. It's late. Empty vessel. That's what you are. Empty. Useless. Mama Christopher's voice grew louder, performing for the neighbors who were surely listening through the thin walls. My son could have married Rebecca. Beautiful Rebecca with her university degree and her rich father. But no, he chose you. A street seller with nothing to offer. Not even a child. Mama, I'm trying. Trying. The older woman laughed bitterly. You've been trying for 5 years. You know what I think? I think you're cursed. Maybe you did something in your past life, and now the gods are punishing you. Punishing my son for choosing you. Christopher said nothing. He never defended her. Not once in 5 years. I've been praying, Mama Christopher continued, pacing the small room like a prosecutor. Praying that my son will wake up and see the truth. That he'll find a real woman. A woman who can give him children. Give me grandchildren. Continue the family name. She turned to Rosemary, her eyes cold. Because you? You're just a curse wearing a wedding ring. After they left, Rosemary sat in the darkness, her hands trembling. She thought about her wedding day, when she believed Christopher's promises of love and partnership. She thought about the first year, when he'd been kind. Before the pregnancy tests came back negative. Before his mother moved into the house. Before love turned to resentment. She pulled out her phone and stared at Lucy's message from earlier that day, asking if she wanted to meet for lunch. Lucy, her only friend from her old life when she'd worked as a project manager before Christopher convinced her to quit. Before everything fell apart. She typed back, I'm free tomorrow. She didn't know that tomorrow, Lucy would offer her more than lunch. She'd offer her a lifeline. A way out. A chance to remember that she was more than what Christopher and his mother said she was. As Rosemary finally lay down, staring at the ceiling, she whispered a prayer she'd stopped believing in. God, if you're listening, please. Show me a way forward. I can't do this anymore. The next afternoon, standing on that dusty roadside as 3 privileged boys mocked her, Gabriel Ojo would extend his hand and answer that prayer in a way she never could have imagined. Rosemary stood in the center of the Ojo mansion kitchen, taking it all in. Gleaming granite countertops. A 6-burner stove that looked like it belonged in a restaurant. A refrigerator so large she could probably fit her entire room inside it. This wasn't a kitchen. This was a cathedral dedicated to cooking. The triplets had dragged chairs to the doorway, sitting like judges at a competition, arms crossed and faces skeptical. Gabriel leaned against the far counter, trying to look casual but clearly curious. Lucy had appeared as well, claiming she needed to discuss something with Gabriel but really just wanting to watch. "What are you going to make?" John asked, his tone suggesting whatever she chose would be wrong. "You'll see," Rosemary said simply, opening the refrigerator. Her hands moved with the confidence of someone who'd cooked 1,000 meals under worse conditions. She pulled out chicken, tomatoes, peppers, onions, rice. Her eyes scanned the spice cabinet, and she almost gasped. Ingredients she'd only dreamed of affording lined the shelves like treasures. "You have 2 hours," Peter announced, checking his expensive watch. "I'll need 45 minutes, Rosemary replied, not looking up. The boys exchanged glances. Confidence or delusion? Rosemary washed her hands and began. The chicken went into a bowl with spices, her fingers working the seasoning into every piece with practiced precision. The onions hit the hot oil, and the kitchen immediately filled with a smell that made everyone's stomach wake up. She moved like a dancer, every motion purposeful, every step part of a rhythm only she could hear. "Where did you learn to cook?" Gabriel asked, genuinely curious. "My grandmother," Rosemary said, stirring the pot. "She always said cooking isn't about expensive ingredients. It's about respect. Respect for the food, respect for the people eating it, and respect for yourself." "Our last cook said cooking was about following recipes exactly," Paul said. "Recipes are guidelines. Love is the secret ingredient." Rosemary smiled, tasting the sauce and adjusting the seasoning. "You can't measure that in a recipe book." The triplets fell silent, watching her work. The kitchen became a theater, and Rosemary was the performer. Rice steamed perfectly. Chicken sizzled and turned golden. The pepper sauce reduced to the perfect consistency. She plated everything with care, arranging each portion like a painting. "Lunch is ready," she announced. The dining table had been set by Lucy. 4 plates sat waiting. Rosemary served the triplets first, then Gabriel. Jollof rice, perfectly cooked with each grain separate but flavorful. Grilled chicken with a pepper glaze that glistened under the chandelier light. Fried plantains on the side, crispy outside and sweet inside. A small bowl of fresh salad. John picked up his fork like it weighed 100 pounds. He speared a piece of chicken, brought it to his mouth, and bit down. His eyes went wide. Peter and Paul watched their brother's face, then quickly tried their own plates. The same expression. Shock. Disbelief. Something close to wonder. Gabriel took a bite and closed his eyes. When he opened them, he was staring at Rosemary like he'd just discovered gold in his backyard. "This is..." John started, then stopped, searching for words. "Incredible," Peter finished. "The best food I've ever tasted," Paul whispered. The 3 boys looked at each other, then back at their plates, then started eating like they'd been starving for years. No talking. No teasing. Just pure, focused eating. Gabriel set down his fork and looked at Rosemary. "When can you start?" "Start, sir." "Working here. Full-time. Name your salary." Rosemary's heart thundered in her chest. The boys said this was just a trial." "The trial is over," Gabriel said firmly. "You're hired. Permanently." John looked up, sauce on his chin, and for the first time since she'd met him, he smiled at her. "Welcome to the family, Rosemary." The first week at the Ojo mansion felt like being dropped into enemy territory. Rosemary had won the battle of the kitchen, but the war was far from over. The triplets had tasted her food and declared it delicious, but that didn't mean they were ready to accept her as part of their world. "Good morning, boys," Rosemary said cheerfully on her 3rd day, entering the kitchen to prepare breakfast. The 3 of them sat at the counter, identical smirks plastered on their faces. That should have been her first warning. She reached for the sugar jar to make their tea. The moment she opened it, the smell hit her. Salt. Someone had replaced every grain of sugar with salt. "Is there a problem?" John asked innocently. Rosemary looked at him, then at the jar, then back at him. "No problem at all. I'll just use honey instead." The smirks faltered slightly. By the fourth day, ingredients started disappearing. The eggs she'd set aside for breakfast? Gone. The tomatoes she'd bought yesterday? Vanished. The special spice blend she'd prepared? Replaced with colored sand. "Have you boys seen the eggs?" Rosemary asked, checking the refrigerator for the third time. "What eggs?" Peter said, his face a mask of confusion. Behind him, barely visible under a kitchen towel, were the missing eggs. "The ones under that towel behind you," Rosemary said calmly. Peter's face went red, but he recovered quickly. "Oh, those eggs. We were doing a science experiment." At 6 in the morning. "Science doesn't have a schedule," Paul added helpfully. On day 5, Rosemary arrived to find the kitchen in complete chaos. Flour covered every surface like snow. Pots and pans were stacked in impossible towers. Someone had drawn faces on all the eggs with permanent marker. The dish soap had been replaced with cooking oil. Gabriel appeared in the doorway, took one look at the disaster, and pinched the bridge of his nose. "Boys. We were helping." John protested. "We wanted to organize the kitchen for Rosemary." "By destroying it?" "We have a different organizational system," Peter explained seriously. But the pranks that hurt most weren't the ones in the kitchen. It was the whispers. The comments they made sure she could overhear. "Remember when Daddy hired that nanny with the university degree?" John said loudly while Rosemary cleaned nearby. At least she knew proper English. "Yeah, and she didn't smell like the street," Peter added. "This one probably doesn't even know how to read," Paul finished. Rosemary's hands stilled on the dish she was washing. She did know how to read. She'd finished secondary school. She'd worked as a project manager before Christopher convinced her to quit. But these boys didn't know that, and they'd already decided who she was based on where they'd found her. She wanted to cry. To quit. To tell them they were cruel and spoiled and exactly the kind of privileged monsters she'd always imagined rich children to be. Instead, she dried her hands, walked to where they sat, and looked each boy in the eye. "I know what you're doing," she said quietly. "You're testing me. Trying to make me leave like all the others. And maybe I do smell like the street sometimes. Maybe I didn't go to fancy schools. Maybe I'm not what you think your father should have hired." She paused. "But I'm not leaving. You can hide my ingredients, mess up my kitchen, replace my sugar with salt. I'll still be here every morning. Because unlike everyone else, I'm not afraid of 3 little boys who are just sad and angry and missing their mother." The triplets stared at her, their mouths open, the cruelty draining from their faces. "Now," Rosemary said, turning back to her work. "Breakfast will be ready in 20 minutes. And yes, I made your favorite." Behind her, she heard nothing. No laughter. No whispers. Just silence. And for the first time, it felt like progress. The morning after Rosemary's confrontation, the triplets arrived in the kitchen to find 3 plates waiting for them. Breakfast was served, but something felt off. The pancakes looked lumpy. The scrambled eggs had a strange color. The orange juice seemed darker than usual. "What's this?" John asked suspiciously. "Breakfast," Rosemary said cheerfully. "Made with all the ingredients you boys so helpfully prepared for me this week. The salt you put in the sugar jar? That's in Peter's pancakes. The sand you mixed with my spices? That's seasoning John's eggs. And Paul, your juice has the food coloring you added to my milk yesterday." The boys stared at their plates in horror. "I'm not eating this," John said, pushing his plate away. "Then I suppose you'll go hungry," Rosemary replied, sitting down with her own perfect plate of food. "Because this is what happens when you sabotage a cook. You eat your own mistakes." Gabriel appeared in the doorway, already dressed for work. He saw the 3 untouched plates and his son's miserable faces. "What's going on?" "The boys are learning about consequences," Rosemary said calmly. "They've spent a week making my work harder. Now they can taste the results." Gabriel looked at his sons, then at Rosemary, and something like respect flickered in his eyes. "Sounds fair to me. Boys, eat your breakfast." "But Daddy..." "Eat your breakfast." The triplets picked up their forks like they were approaching poison. John took one bite of his salty pancakes and gagged. Peter's sand-spiced eggs crunched between his teeth. Paul's Technicolor juice tasted like chemicals. "Now you know," Rosemary said quietly, "that when you mess with someone's work, you mess with your own life too. I could make you a fresh breakfast. But I won't. Not until you apologize." The room fell silent. The triplets looked at each other, having an entire conversation with just their eyes. Finally, John spoke. "We're sorry." "For what?" Rosemary pressed. "For hiding your ingredients. For putting salt in the sugar. For being mean." The words came out reluctantly, but they came. Rosemary nodded and stood. "Apology accepted. Now, let me make you real breakfast." 20 minutes later, fresh pancakes, properly seasoned eggs, and clean orange juice appeared before them. The boys ate quietly, the fight temporarily knocked out of them. "Can I ask you something?" Paul said after a long silence. "Of course." "Why do you cook on the street? Why not in a restaurant?" Rosemary paused, considering her answer. "Because restaurants didn't want to hire someone like me. No fancy papers, no culinary school degree. But people on the street? They didn't care about papers. They cared if the food tasted good. So I made the street my restaurant." "Weren't you scared?" Peter asked. "Terrified. Every single day. Scared the rain would ruin my setup. Scared nobody would buy. Scared bigger vendors would chase me away." She smiled. "But I learned something important. Being scared doesn't mean you stop. It means you're doing something that matters." "Did people ever make fun of you?" John asked quietly. "For being poor?" Rosemary met his eyes, understanding the real question beneath. "All the time. Rich people in cars would laugh at me. Call me names. Treat me like I was invisible." She paused. "Just like you did that first day." John looked down at his plate, shame coloring his cheeks. "But you know what?" Rosemary continued. "Those same people would come back the next day and buy my food. Because in the end, skill speaks louder than status. Quality beats quantity. And respect isn't something you're born with, it's something you earn." The triplets absorbed this in silence. Then Paul asked, "Can you teach us to cook?" Rosemary blinked, surprised. "You want to learn?" "If we're going to be mean to you, we should at least understand what you actually do," Peter said with unexpected honesty. For the first time since arriving at the mansion, Rosemary laughed. Really laughed. "All right then. Tomorrow after school, we start lessons." Over the next few weeks, the Ojo mansion underwent a transformation that was nothing short of miraculous. The kitchen, once a battlefield where chefs went to die, became the heart of the home. The triplets, previously known for terrorizing staff with biological warfare involving lizards and glue, were now found hovering around the stove, begging for just one more piece of fried plantain. Peter, the ringleader of their cruelty, had even stopped wearing his sunglasses indoors. One afternoon, he quietly pushed his plate toward the sink, a gesture so foreign that Lucy, watching from the doorway, nearly fainted. "Auntie Rosemary," Mary said one evening, leaning against the counter as Rosemary chopped vegetables. "You make the house smell like a real home." Rosemary smiled, a genuine warmth spreading through her chest. For 8 hours a day, she wasn't the barren woman or the failure. She was Auntie Rosemary, the magician of flavors, the one who could make billionaire children listen with a single stern look and a promise of puff puff. She felt seen. She felt valued. She felt, for the first time in forever, like a mother. But the Cinderella spell always broke at 6 p.m. Leaving the air-conditioned sanctuary of the mansion, Rosemary took the long, dusty bus ride back to her reality. She walked into her small apartment, humming a tune she had learned from the triplets, her spirit higher than it had been in years. That spirit crashed the moment she opened the door. The living room was suffocatingly small, but tonight it felt even smaller. Christopher was sitting on the worn-out sofa, but he wasn't alone. Next to him sat a young woman, round-faced and glowing, dressed in a bright yellow lace that clashed violently with the drab curtains. She looked comfortable, too comfortable. "Christopher?" Rosemary asked, her grip tightening on her handbag. "Who is this?" Christopher didn't stand up. He took a slow sip of his beer, savoring the moment with a cruelty that chilled the room. "You are back late again," he muttered, before gesturing to the woman beside him. "Rosemary, meet Ngozi." The woman, Ngozi, offered a small, shy smile that didn't quite reach her eyes. She placed a hand protectively over her stomach. "I don't understand," Rosemary whispered, the blood draining from her face. "What is there to understand?" Christopher snapped, his voice rising. "I am a man, Rosemary. I need a legacy. I need a son." He reached out and placed his hand over Ngozi's hand, interlacing their fingers. "Since you have decided to be a dry land, a useless decorative piece in my house, I have found a solution. Since you can't give me children, Ngozi will. She is my second wife, and she is moving in tonight." The apartment, once a place of modest peace, had transformed into a cage. For months, Rosemary moved through the rooms like a ghost, haunting the edges of a life that was no longer hers. Ngozi, with her belly swelling like a ripe pumpkin, sat permanently on the best cushion, her feet propped up on the center table. She didn't lift a finger, she didn't have to. Mama Christopher had effectively moved in, ostensibly to care for the golden carrier, but in reality, to torment the barren one. "Don't touch that water," Mama Christopher would snap if Rosemary reached for a jug in the fridge. "That is for the pregnant woman. We don't want your bad luck contaminating the child." Rosemary would pull her hand back as if burned, saying nothing. The silence was her only shield. Christopher, the man who had once promised to protect her, was worse than the women. He didn't shout, he simply erased her. He walked past her as if she were a piece of furniture. If she spoke, he grunted. If she cried, he turned up the volume on the television. He spent his evenings massaging Ngozi's feet, whispering names for the unborn son he was certain was coming, while Rosemary ironed his shirts in the corner, invisible. The only time Rosemary breathed was when she stepped through the grand iron gates of the Ojo mansion. Work became her addiction. If her home was a grave, the mansion was the resurrection. She arrived earlier each day, throwing herself into the tasks with a fervor that bordered on obsession. She scrubbed floors that were already clean, she reorganized the pantry by color, she cooked feasts that could feed a village. The kitchen became her kingdom, the one place where her hands produced magic instead of disappointment. The triplets noticed the change. They stopped playing pranks and started hovering, drawn to her quiet intensity. "Auntie Rosemary," Paul asked one afternoon, watching her aggressively knead dough, "why are you fighting the bread?" Rosemary paused, wiping sweat from her brow with the back of her hand. She looked down at the small boy, who was looking at her with genuine concern, a look she hadn't received from her own husband in years. "I'm not fighting, Paul," she said softly, forcing a smile that didn't quite reach her eyes. "I'm just making sure it rises. Sometimes, you have to push things hard to make them grow." "You look sad," Mary added, abandoning her iPad to lean against Rosemary's leg. "Did someone make you cry? Do you want me to tell Daddy to fire them?" Rosemary laughed, a brittle, watery sound. "No, my darling. No one needs to be fired." She hugged them tight, holding on for a second too long, terrifyingly aware that these borrowed children were the only love she had left. The walk from the bus stop usually took 10 minutes, but tonight, Rosemary's feet felt heavy even before she turned the corner. The street was unusually crowded for a Tuesday night. A small gathering of neighbors stood clustered around the gate of her compound, their hushed whispers turning into sharp silence as she approached. Then she saw it. A pile of bags, cheap, striped gonna-must-go sacks, sat forlornly in the dust near the open gutter. A few of her dresses had spilled out, their fabric instantly stained by the red earth. A familiar cracked plastic bucket rolled on its side. It was her life, evicted and discarded like refuse. Before Rosemary could even ask a question, the gate swung open, and Mama Christopher marched out. She was tying her wrapper aggressively, her face contorted in a mask of righteous fury that Rosemary knew was largely a performance for the audience. "She is here," Mama Christopher announced, pointing a trembling finger at Rosemary. "The witch has returned." The neighbors gasped, stepping back as if Rosemary were radioactive. Rosemary stood frozen, clutching her handbag, the smell of the Ojo mansion's expensive air freshener still clinging to her clothes, a stark contrast to the smell of the gutter. "Mama, what is this?" "Don't call me Mama," the older woman screamed, her voice shrill enough to wake the dead. "I have tolerated your dryness for years. I said, let God heal her. But now? Now you want to drink blood. Ngozi has been vomiting since morning. The pastor said it is you. You are using your evil eyes to shrink the baby because your own womb is a desert." "I haven't even seen Ngozi today," Rosemary said calmly, though her heart was hammering against her ribs like a trapped bird. "Liar." Mama Christopher spat on the ground near Rosemary's feet. "You are jealous. You have cursed my son with your barren womb, and now you want to kill his heir. Pack your rags and go. If I see you here by morning, I will call the youth to stone you." Rosemary looked up at the window of the apartment. The curtain moved slightly, then fell back into place. Christopher was watching. He was watching, and he was doing nothing. The realization hit her not with a bang, but with a cold, clarifying silence. There was nothing left to fight for. This house was not a home. It was a prison she had been paying rent for with her soul. She didn't scream. She didn't beg. She didn't give the neighbors the satisfaction of her tears. Slowly, with a dignity that made the onlookers uncomfortable, Rosemary bent down. She zipped up the bags. She gathered her spilled dresses. Then, without a single word to the woman who had tormented her for years, she turned her back on the compound and began to drag her heavy bags into the darkness. For 3 days, Rosemary lay curled on a mattress in Lucy's living room, staring at a water stain on the ceiling. Her phone buzzed incessantly, Gabriel, the house landline, even numbers she didn't recognize, but she couldn't answer. How could she return to the pristine world of the Ojos when she was now officially a homeless, accursed woman? She felt like a contaminant, a stain that would ruin their perfection just by being near it. "Rosemary, please," Lucy whispered, peeking into the room with a plate of boiled yam. "You have to eat. You can't just fade away because of what those wicked people said." "I am bad luck, Lucy," Rosemary croaked, her voice rusty from disuse. "Let me be." Before Lucy could argue, a thunderous knock shook the flimsy wooden door. It wasn't a polite request for entry, it was a demand. Lucy hurried to open it, and instantly, the small room seemed to shrink. Gabriel Ojo stood in the doorway, filling the frame in a bespoke charcoal suit that looked ridiculous against the peeling paint of the hallway. But it wasn't the billionaire who made Rosemary scramble to sit up. It was the 3 small figures pushing past his legs. Auntie. Mary, Peter, and Paul didn't walk, they scrambled. They launched themselves onto the mattress, burying their faces in Rosemary's neck, their expensive clothes mingling with her worn wrapper without a care in the world. "We are hungry," Paul wailed, looking genuinely distressed. "The new chef made pasta, and it tasted like rubber bands. We haven't eaten since you left." Rosemary tried to pull away, shame flushing her cheeks hot. "Paul, please. I can't come back. I'm not who you think I am. I have nothing." "We don't care," Peter interrupted, his voice cracking. The boy who had once thrown a coin at her feet now looked at her with red-rimmed eyes behind his glasses. "We are sorry. We were wrong. We called you a street rat, but you're not. You're the best thing that ever happened to us." "You made us a family again," Mary whispered, gripping Rosemary's hand tight. "Please come home." Rosemary looked up to see Gabriel stepping into the room. He didn't look at the poverty surrounding them, he looked only at her. "They are right, you know," Gabriel said quietly, his voice filling the silence. "The mansion was just a house of noise until you walked in. It has never been a home until you arrived. He took a step closer, offering a hand. We aren't offering you a shift, Rosemary. We have a suite prepared in the East Wing. A permanent one. No more commuting. No more landlords. Come home. Tears, hot and fast, finally broke through Rosemary's numbness. She thought of Christopher and his mother, who shared her blood and name but gave her nothing but pain. Then she looked at these strangers, who owed her nothing yet offered her everything. Slowly, she reached out and took Gabriel's hand. "Okay," she whispered, pulling the triplets into a hug that felt like a shield against the world. "I'm ready to go home."